There are moments in history so strange, so unbelievable, that they almost sound like science fiction. Moments where humanity stands at the edge of the unknown and decides to take one more step, even without knowing what waits in the darkness ahead. But sometimes the first explorer is not a scientist, not a soldier, not even a human being. Sometimes, history chooses a small stray dog wandering the frozen streets of Moscow. Tonight, I want you to imagine the world in 1957. The Cold War is tightening its grip on humanity. Nations are terrified of each other. Rockets powerful enough to cross continents are suddenly being aimed toward the sky. Nobody knows what space truly is. Is it survivable? Is it deadly? Can a living heart continue beating beyond Earth? These were not philosophical questions at the time. They were terrifying scientific mysteries. And in the middle of that uncertainty, a tiny dog named Laika was placed inside a spacecraft no bigger than a refrigerator and launched into the infinite darkness above our planet. She became the first living creature to orbit Earth, long before astronauts became heroes and long before humanity understood the true dangers of space. But this is not just a story about science. It is a story about ambition, sacrifice, fear, curiosity, and the strange way progress is often built on the shoulders of the smallest and most forgotten lives. Because hidden inside Laika's journey is a deeper truth about humanity itself. Our species has always been willing to risk everything just to answer one impossible question. What lies beyond the horizon? And the most haunting part of all, Laika never came back. What happened during those final hours in space remained hidden from the world for decades. The truth behind her mission is far darker, more emotional, and more important than most people realize. Because without this one small dog, the entire future of human space exploration might have unfolded very differently. So, tonight we are going to travel back to the beginning of the space age, to the moment when humanity first sent a living soul beyond Earth, and uncover the extraordinary story of the dog who became the first animal in space. Long before human beings touched the stars, before astronauts floated above Earth and planted flags into history, the world was locked inside a silent war of science, fear, and ambition. Two superpowers stared at each other across the planet, each desperate to prove that its system, its technology, and its intelligence were superior. This was the Cold War, but the battlefield was no longer limited to land, oceans, or skies. Suddenly, the battlefield stretched upward into the infinite darkness of space itself. The Soviet Union had already shocked the world with the launch of Sputnik 1 launch, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. Imagine the feeling people had at that moment. For the first time in human history, something built by human hands was circling the planet from space. Radios across the world picked up the strange beeping signal from orbit, and that tiny sound carried a terrifying message. Humanity had entered a new age. But once you send a machine into space, the next question becomes unavoidable. Could a living creature survive there? Scientists faced a problem that sounds simple today, but was terrifying at the time. Nobody knew what space would do to a living body. Would the heart stop beating in zero gravity? Would the brain become confused? Could lungs breathe normally? Would radiation kill instantly? Space was not merely far away, it was completely unknown. Before risking the life of a human astronaut, scientists wanted a test subject. They chose animals because animals could reveal how living organisms reacted to launch forces, weightlessness, confinement, and cosmic radiation. Monkeys were used by the United States, but the Soviet Union selected dogs because they believed dogs could endure stress, hunger, and isolation more calmly. They especially preferred stray dogs taken from the cold streets of Moscow because they assumed those animals had already survived harsh conditions and were naturally tougher than domesticated pets. Among those dogs was a small mixed-breed stray later named Laika. She was not born for glory. She did not belong to royalty or science laboratories. She wandered through snowy streets, searching for scraps of food, like countless forgotten animals in the city. Yet, history has a strange habit of pulling ordinary creatures into extraordinary moments. Scientists noticed that Laika was calm, obedient, and able to tolerate stressful environments. She weighed only around 6 kilograms, small enough to fit inside the narrow cabin of a spacecraft. At that time, engineers were racing against time. The Soviet leader wanted another major victory before the anniversary of the Russian Revolution, which meant scientists had only weeks to prepare an entirely new mission. There was no time to build a spacecraft capable of returning safely to Earth. From the beginning, the mission was designed as a one-way journey. Think about what that means for a moment. Humanity's first living passenger into orbit was sent into space with no rescue plan. The scientists knew it. The engineers knew it. Even the people caring for Laika understood the truth. Yet the pressure of competition was stronger than morality, stronger than hesitation, stronger than emotion. This is one of the strange patterns in scientific history. Great discoveries often arrive carrying both brilliance and tragedy together. Laika's training was harsh because space itself was harsh. She was placed inside tiny capsules for long periods to simulate the cramped conditions of the spacecraft. At first, the dogs became restless and panicked, but eventually they adapted to the confinement. Scientists exposed them to loud noises, violent vibrations, and spinning centrifuges designed to imitate the crushing acceleration during launch. Sensors were attached to their bodies to monitor breathing, pulse, and blood pressure. They even trained the dogs to eat special gel-like food because normal eating would not work in space. Everything about the preparation revealed how primitive early space technology truly was. Today, astronauts train inside advanced simulators and return safely in reusable spacecraft. But during Laika's era, scientists were exploring complete darkness with almost no knowledge of what awaited them. Then came the launch of Sputnik 2 launch on November 3, 1957. The rocket thundered upward, carrying a living passenger into the heavens for the first time in history. As the spacecraft climbed higher, Laika heartbeat reportedly surged to several times its normal rate. Imagine the violence of that moment from the perspective of a small stray dog who had once walked through quiet, snowy streets. The cabin shook with explosive force while Earth rapidly disappeared below. And then suddenly came weightlessness, a sensation no living creature had ever experienced before. Data transmitted back to Earth showed that Laika survived the launch and reached orbit alive. Scientifically, this was a monumental achievement. It proved that a living organism could survive launch and function, at least temporarily, in the environment of space. That single fact would later help open the door for human astronauts. But behind the celebration was a darker reality hidden from the public. For years, Soviet officials claimed Laika survived several days in orbit before dying peacefully after running out of oxygen. The truth was far more tragic. Decades later, scientists revealed that a malfunction in the spacecraft's thermal control system caused temperatures inside the cabin to rise dangerously high. Laika likely died from overheating and stress only a few hours after launch. The world did not learn this immediately because the mission had become a symbol of national pride. Governments during the Cold War carefully controlled information, shaping stories to inspire power and confidence rather than honesty. Yet, even with its tragedy, Laika's mission transformed space science forever. Her flight provided biological data that helped scientists understand how living bodies reacted beyond Earth. Without those early experiments, sending humans into orbit would have been far more dangerous. Just 4 years later, Vostok 1 carried Yuri Gagarin into orbit, turning humanity itself into a spacefaring species. In many ways, Laika became the bridge between earthbound life and human exploration of the cosmos. What makes Laika's story unforgettable is not merely the science. It is the emotional contradiction at its center. Humanity reached upward toward the stars, using one of the smallest and most vulnerable creatures imaginable. A stray dog became part of one of civilization's greatest technological leaps. Her story forces us to confront difficult questions about progress, sacrifice, and ambition. Scientific advancement often appears glorious when viewed from a distance, but up close it is built from countless risks, failures, and moral compromises. Laika never understood politics, space races, or national pride. Yet her journey became permanently written into the history of exploration. Even now, decades later, people across the world still remember the little dog, who traveled farther than any living creature before her, circling silently above Earth while humanity took its first trembling steps toward the stars. In the end, the story of Laika is far bigger than a single mission or a single moment in history. It is the story of humanity standing at the doorway of the universe for the very first time, terrified yet curious enough to step forward anyway. A small stray dog from the streets of Moscow became the first living creature to leave Earth, and in doing so, she changed the future of civilization forever. Every astronaut who later traveled into orbit, every spacecraft that touched the moon, every rover sent to distant planets, and every dream of reaching the stars carries a small piece of her legacy. Laika's journey reminds us that exploration is never simple. Behind every scientific triumph are sacrifices, risks, and difficult moral questions. Humanity's greatest achievements are often born from uncertainty, courage, and the willingness to venture into places no one has ever gone before. That is what makes this story unforgettable. It is not only about space, it is about the unstoppable human desire to understand the unknown, even when the answers come with pain and consequence. And perhaps that is why Laika still matters today. Because when we look up at the night sky, we are not just seeing stars. We are seeing the same mystery that has called to humanity for thousands of years. The same mystery that pushed rockets into space, inspired scientists to dream beyond Earth, and transformed one forgotten stray dog into an immortal symbol of exploration. Thank you all for joining me on this incredible journey through one of the most emotional chapters in the history of space exploration. If this story inspired you, surprised you, or made you look at the universe differently, then Laika's mission is still alive even after all these decades. Good luck. Keep questioning everything around you. Keep looking toward the stars, and never lose your curiosity about the universe. Thank you.